Hey, everybody, welcome back to another fantastic edition of the His and Her Money Show, where we make it our business to help you take dominion over your money and your life. Thank you for tuning in once again, because we know you could be tuned in elsewhere, but the fact that you're here with the His and Her Money Show means a lot to us. So thank you from the bottom of our hearts. As you go out the duration of this episode, if you hear jewels dropped, and trust me, jewels will be dropped. Do me a favor, share this with your friend, be a good neighbor, be a good cousin, and share this episode with them. Put it in your IG stories or anywhere on social media. Our handle on all platforms is at His and Her Money. Tag us and we will show you love right back. You're going to love today's episode because, man, we're talking about a little business. We're talking business around here, man. We definitely want you to manage your money well. We definitely want you to get out of debt. We definitely want you to invest well, but we want you to also have other ways by which you can make money. That is a big part of the journey to freedom as well. And today's episode is going to be another feather in your cap to help you do just that. We're going to be talking with a profound entrepreneur who has done some amazing things in the entrepreneurship space and didn't just do it for himself, but also takes the time to help others create streams of income for themselves as well. We're going to be talking with George Actionpong, and he's going to be sharing his journey from corporate to entrepreneurship and all the things that he's learned along the way. So get your pen and paper ready, get your notes app out, get your iPad Pro fired up, because you're going to need to take some good notes with this one. Trust me when I tell you. I'm not going to belabor it any longer. Let's get George on so we can hear all his incredible advice and his story. Hey, George, welcome to the His and Her Money Show.
Hey, man, thanks so much for having me. And thank you for that gracious introduction, man. I feel like, man, I got to duck my head a little bit to walk in the room, man. You big me up a little bit, man. But I appreciate that, man.
We've been peeping you from a distance for a long time. If you're watching on YouTube, I actually own that shirt that he's wearing before he even knew who I was. I just bought the shirt because it was dope. And then believe it or not, my pastor saw me in the short and said, sir, I need one in medium. So then I had to go back and buy another one for my pastor. So your brand speaks for itself, but we stand by the people we bring on the show. We don't just bring anybody on the show for you guys. We vet people, and then we bring good people on so that you all can get some good information to help your life. But George, man, some people are being introduced to you for the very first time right here and right now. So can you say hello to them and let them know what you're all about?
Absolutely. Well, hello to the beautiful listeners and viewers of the His and Her Money podcast. So very grateful to be on this platform. Just like his point, I've watched them from afar and loved what you guys stand for, love what you guys represent. And we need so many more of us doing exactly what you guys are doing. So I'm honored to be on the platform. So thank you guys for allowing me to share a little bit about my journey with you guys. So I'll try to give you the short and condensed version so we can get into the meat and potatoes of the show. So I've been in the financial services industry for just north of a decade. And saying it out loud reminds me that I'm getting a little bit older. But I started out because I wanted to, be a resource to people of color in the space. But the firm that I worked for at the time, before I started my own practice, which we'll get into, they wanted me to help other people get richer, right? We'll leave it at that, right? And while that's fine, that's just not kind of really what I signed up for. And so what I did was I got my licenses, my credentials, my expertise, and I said, you know what? I want to be able to serve people that look like me, not because I want to exclude anybody else, but because it's no secret that we are dramatically underrepresented when it comes to learning about being able to build wealth, get out of debt, save, invest, et cetera, which, back in that time, 2010, 2011, it wasn't nearly as many people as it is now talking about this stuff, right? So I was like, you know what? I want to create this firm, right, where I can work with people that look like me. So I started a registered investment advisory firm. And for those who don't know what that is, it's a fee-only financial planning firm where we don't get any, kickbacks to work with our clients, right? It's all, truly fiduciary. But as I started to build that business, what I realized is there's still a broader spectrum of people that may not be ready for a one-to-one advisor, but still need education, right? And so I started doing things like creating a podcast, creating ebooks, and just creating different financial literacy resources that anybody, regardless of where their stage was, they could tap in. And so you fast forward a few years later, I'm like, man, well, how can I just drum up conversations organically? Because if I'm just walking down the street, no one's gonna know. I mean, I'm not that, I don't think I'm that important or that popular, right? No one's gonna know that, hey, that's George from this platform, right? But I want people to always have a reason to like ask me about, hey, well, what's that about? And so I thought, well, I don't want to spend money on a bunch of billboards. How could I just drum up organically the conversation around building wealth as a person of color? And ultimately, what I ended up doing was creating a merchandise brand that was a kind of an extension or just ancillary aspect of my main business, which was my firm, just to spark conversation. Because once that conversation is sparked, anybody that knows me can tell you, if you ask the right questions, you don't got to pay me anything. I'm going to give it all away for free anyway. Because I love talking about this stuff, right? I love empowering the culture. And so I said, this was my way, and I have it on right now, my way of sparking conversations when it comes to building wealth as a personal color. Now, what happened was something that was very interesting. What happened is people started to associate the Melanin Money brand, that's the name of this brand, with everything that I did. Like they thought that that was like my bread and butter, my tried and true. And me, having a background in marketing, I didn't go all the way back to college, but I got a double major in marketing and economics. And for me, I'm kind of paying attention to the marketplace. I'm like, okay, well, let me get out my own way. It seems like there's something here more than just the merchandise. And while I did launch it with that idea, I realized that I needed to formalize and create an ecosystem around this brand. And ultimately, we rebranded our podcast to the Melanin Money Show as a result of it. And we created a financial education community called the Melanin Millionaires Club, which I'm sure as we talk about this business, we'll be able to expound upon a little bit more.
And for you, this whole foray out of a corporate environment into an entrepreneurship environment was because you wanted to specifically help people of color understand money and grow wealth. What are some things that you have seen over this decade or even as of current that we're deficient in as far as our knowledge base goes?
Yeah, 100%. While there's a lot more interest in the realm of investing in the market. When I do surveys periodically, the vast majority of people are still very uncertain about what it means to invest in the stock market, right? They're still very adamant about tucking all of their money away in the bank account. And as we know, with inflation and what it's doing, that's just not sustainable, right? So the area of investing is a very big pitfall, I would say, for most people of color. Another thing is it's super fundamental, but having a true handle on your cash flow, having a real solid cash flow strategy to know where every dollar is going so that you can even have the available resources to know where to put it to make it work for you, right? A lot of people are just, I call them, bank balance entrepreneurs or bank balance, working professionals, meaning what they do is they log into their online banking. If there's money there, they spend it. If it's not, okay, oops, what happened, right? It's almost like back in the day when you were in college, if you went to college and the grades came out and you weren't super certain of like how you did and you were afraid to log in, you kind of like covered the screen a little bit and like were nervous to look at it. That's how people feel every Tuesday when they log into their online banking after those pending charges post, right? And so just really having a solid cash flow plan that works for them. And what I realized, the reason why there's a deficiency there is because it's called personal finance for a reason, right? While I have a voice in this space, you guys have a tremendous voice in this space, and there's plenty of others. Yes, there's a lot of commonalities in the thread of what it means to be fundamentally sound, but you have to do something that aligns with the way that you see the world, right? Because there's a qualitative metric of financial planning and there's a quantitative metric. So the quantitative aspect is X's and O's. I make this, I spend this, if I should be able to save this and invest that, right? But the qualitative metric is, does this spending align with what I say I value, right? What is it that I want most out of life? Because when you can conceptualize that, it makes it a little easier to be committed to where those resources are going to be allocated. Because if you're just saving money and budgeting because it's the right, smart adult thing to do, you're probably going to fall off the wagon. The same way the person who wants to get a six pack just because it's summertime, right? What's going to happen as soon as fall and winter rolls around? You have to have a deeper intrinsic reason as to why you're doing what you're doing. And that is what I found a lot of people to be proficient in. And that's across the board, not just with people of color, but that's something that I've seen consistently is people not really drilling into that deeper why. So they can really latch on to the decisions they need to make to move the needle.
Yeah, and I think that deeper why and the lack of appropriate decisions around money management, I think, you correct me if I'm wrong, should be a precursor to the foray into entrepreneurship. And here's why I say that, because a lot of platforms are created currently because entrepreneurship is cute. And so they do a lot of content around the power of entrepreneurship, which is true. It is a powerful thing, but it can also set you back if you go into that without even understanding money, like you just talked about, power of cash flow and things of that nature. So we're here to talk about entrepreneurship, but as a precursor, what would be your admonishment to people that they should understand prior to taking this leap or trying to build something in additional as far as an income stream to their 9 to 5?
Great question. And I agree wholeheartedly. It definitely is a precursor. The first thing you want to know about entrepreneurship is like, when you're in corporate America, right, it's very black and white, right? It's like, okay, I make 60,000, 80,000, 100,000. Uncle Sam is going to take his cut and then the rest hit your bank account and you can use 100% of that to live how you want to live, right? With entrepreneurship, you got to realize that you have to allocate your money in a variety of ways. So let's just say you have the coveted 6 figures. Everybody wants to make $100,000, right, or more, right? So let's say you hit that 100,000, right? A portion of that 100,000 has to be allocated to keep the lights on for the business, like the fundamental expenses, right? So for this podcast, they're not giving us these mics away, right? They're not giving us this software to be able to record. So what are the fundamental expenses I got to cover just to keep the lights on? Then you got to factor in, well, I don't want to stay where I'm at. I want to grow, right? I want to be a solo entrepreneur forever. I might need some support staff. I might need a VA. I might need different people that are going to help me grow this thing. I might need more systems, technology, infrastructure. So then you got to be thinking about a portion of your budget of the money that's coming in for growth purposes, right? So that you can get your business to the next level. Then, right, not even thinking about taxes and reserving money for that, because it's not like your job where, Uncle Sam's going to get his on the front end. You have to proactively make sure that you're carving out a portion of your budget for taxes, right? I think Carter's been on this podcast and he probably gave you all the tips and strategies on that, right? But then from there, then you can identify, okay, well, what portion of this is realistic for me to pay myself to sustain my lifestyle? Because what'll happen is the average person will think, well, once I make 100,000 in my business and I was making 100,000, corporate, I can leave. But the problem is you're probably spending a good portion of that 100,000 on your current lifestyle. And if you're making 100,000 in your business, you can't factor that all as income that you can leverage for your lifestyle. So that's the first thing, is you have to really understand the different buckets that you have to allocate money towards to grow your business. The second thing I would say is, what kind of as a piggyback off of that, is you have to keep your highs low and your lows high. Here's what I mean by that. Going back to the example of corporate America, your paycheck is going to be the same every 2 weeks unless you get a raise or a bonus, right? It's going to be the same. And entrepreneurship, the reason why it's glamorized is because you can be your own boss and set your own hours. You can make unlimited income. Sure, you can. Absolutely. You can do a lot of things, but it doesn't mean that it's always going to be predictable and consistent. You're going to make the exact same amount of money every time. So what you have to do is have that fundamental cash flow plan and say, okay, when I did the math, I can afford to pay myself, let's call it in this example, $4,000, right? Great. So if you have a great windfall month where brand deals come in and however it is you make money, you make way more than your traditional average, you still pay yourself that 4,000, right? Because as a business, you need operating reserves for the ebbs and flows that you cannot foresee, right? And so that's something that everybody has to know going to entrepreneurship. And you also need capital reserves for growth opportunities, right? So those are things that I didn't know 100% going into it, but because I was going into an industry where my job was to help people with their money, I was able to learn it pretty quickly, because I always tell people it was hard to say back then. Gosh, it was so hard to say. But like, I got into financial services, right, at some point as a financial advisor who was an entrepreneurial advisor, right? The caveat to that is, while I had the experience and credentials at that point, it didn't negate the fact that I still was a new entrepreneur, right? And it was very hard to say that back then, because it's like, who am I, this, money guy, right? But his starting a business. And I'm like, sometimes I'm trying to figure it out where it's coming from too. You know what I mean? Because entrepreneurship is that different than managing money or just, having cash flow. So it's like, you really have to understand, just because you're good at something and that's what's prompting you to start a business does not necessarily exclusively mean that you know how to grow a business. You might just be good at something, which is why oftentimes we see the founder transition out of the CEO role as companies grow, because they don't necessarily have the CEO acumen to run the business. They're just a visionary. right? And you have to have the humility and understanding, okay, well, where are my deficiencies? How do I want to grow so that I can make sure this thing can last long term?
Good stuff, man. So we're here to talk about the fact that you built a powerful merchandise brand. For some people, it is an additive to an existing brand. They want to create an arm of merchandise. For some people, that's the business that they want to create, is a merchandise brand. So for you, back when Melanin Money was just in your head, how did you start this journey to creating a merchandise brand? What are some upfront or some precursor steps or precursor thinking that had to go into it?
Yeah. So the first thing I'll say, and by all means, as a small business owner, visionary, you can definitely start something that's just like a good idea. You could do that. I see people do it all the time. What has helped me is alignment, right? Even though I have things that may seem abstract to the general public, if you really dig into it and connect the dots, everything that I've ever done is in alignment to the mission to helping people of color be the wealth starters in their family, whether abstractly or directly, right? So when I was sitting around thinking about this idea, ironically enough, we don't have enough time to go into the details of it, but I had a health journey the same year I got married. I had a spinal surgery, and long story short, I was kind of out for the count, sitting down, couldn't do much. And so when I was sitting down and I was thinking, it made me think about selling something that didn't involve my time. I was like, okay, this is a learning lesson. Now, granted, I practiced what I preach. I had the disability insurance. I had everything I needed to have in place to be okay during that season. But it was a great reminder that it's all you need some type of arm or some type of business that can make money independently of your time, right? And so that's kind of where the original idea came from. And then it was like, okay, well, what is my mission? Right, my mission is to empower people of color to build wealth. How can I align that mission with something that will do that? And then of course, you can do it with courses, you can do it with a lot of things, which I've done. But ultimately, I landed on a merchandise brand because I thought it would be a 2-for-1. I was like, okay, number one, it's something that I can sell. And then number two, it's going to drive ancillary traffic or awareness to my overall mission, which ultimately I might get a client from it, or something like that. Right. And so that was kind of my thought process, which because it was in alignment for me, it really made sense. So then it was like, okay, the name goes back to the same thing. I'm serving people of color. I'm in the money space. Now, I'll be honest, like I'm decent at marketing. It didn't come this easily. It was kind of like, a little bit of back and forth. I won't lie to you there. But like I'm thinking, okay, I'm in the financial space. I'm trying to help people with money, black money. I went back and forth, brainstormed it, and eventually I landed on Melanin Money, right? And I searched, how we all do. We go to GoDaddy, we search. I'm like, oh my gosh, God is telling me this is for me because it's available and it's only $11.99. I don't gotta try to negotiate with nobody. This is for me. Now, the caveat to that is if the domain that was in your head is not available, please don't let that stop you, make you think like it's a sign that it's not for you, right? It's just a domain, but it just so happened in my case that the domain that I wanted was available, right? So I knew it, bought it for $11.99, and that was that. Then I started researching how to sell clothes online, right? So then I found out that Shopify was a premier platform. Google is your friend. YouTube is your friend. I found out that Shopify was a great platform. This is end of 2017, I want to say. End of 2017. And then I didn't know anything about this stuff. That's what I want to empower you by. I knew zero about this, right? Googled it, found Shopify. I was like, all right, well, they got a free trial. I was like, 14 days. Let's see if I can figure something out in 14 days. Right. At this point, I didn't have any designs yet. So if I were you, I would start going down the design process before you do the trial. But that's neither here nor there. So I signed up for the trial. And they have with Shopify, they have themes and templates that you can leverage. You don't have to be a website expert. So my first website I made on my lunch break, basically, right? I just browsed on Shopify, looked at one of the themes. I was like, well, this looks decent. I can, grab some pictures and boom, boom, boom. And I had a decent theme that could go live within an hour, right? Of course, there was some back end things. I had to figure out how to add products and stuff like that. But by and large, I had a website in about an hour. Then I was like, okay, well, I've never sold merchandise. I don't know if anybody's going to like these statements that were in my head. I hope they do, but I have no idea. So how can I do this? What's the lowest barrier to entry way to getting this out there without having to spend an arm and a leg on inventory? Right. So then what happened is I saw that Shopify, similar to Apple, they have their own app store. And in that app store, you can find different plugins that you can run with your store. One of those plugins being what they call a print on demand service, which basically means you can take your logo, which I'll talk about how you can get that created, take your logo, you can mock it up on a shirt, and then you can still sell that on your Shopify store, but it'll be distributed and fulfilled by a third party, meaning that you don't have to have any upfront costs really outside of the whatever it costs you to design your logo, right? Because you can have it on your website. Somebody can go to melaninmoney.com, click order, add to cart, buy. I'll get a notification that somebody bought it, and I don't have to do anything else, right? Now, obviously, there's pros and cons to that. The pro is it gives you a great opportunity to test the market to see if people like your stuff. That's the pro, without having to spend a lot of money. The con is that naturally, if someone's handling 100% of the fulfillment and distribution, the profit margins are going to be thinner. But if you're not having to come out of pocket with any money, you're not losing any money, it's not a bad way to start. And that's where I started. So I use that as a testing ground to see what the market wanted. Right now, to kind of go back to how you even get your logo in the first place, there's a lot of ways you can do it. You can find a freelance, graphic designer. What I use at the time, and there's probably better services, but I use Fiverr.com, right? And Fiverr.com is a website where you can find just about anything when it comes to freelancers doing graphic design, ebook design, whatever the case may be, right? So once I narrowed down a few typography designs in terms of what I wanted to say, I sent it. I found somebody on Fiverr.com, and I want to say this one in particular, which was our first bestseller, was about just about $100, right? Maybe give or take $100. I can go back and look at my account, but just give or take $100, right? So now I got this created for $100. I got a free trial on Shopify. At the time I had the plan that was like $29 a month. So really for like $129, I was able to get started. The only other thing that I did that cost money is I pulled a few of my friends, and this was after the website was already launched. I pulled a few of my friends together who just loved me, and I said, hey, I'm gonna get some samples made locally. I wanted to do a quick photo shoot. It was a really basic photo shoot. But they held me down, did a photo shoot. And so I spent a little bit of money, I think another $100 or so on just some samples for like the people that did the photo shoot. So that way people could see what it looks like on other people, right? And that was it. That's how I got started. So it's very low barrier to entry. Now, I don't want to oversimplify it. Of course, there's a lot of things that you have to do to grow the brand, market the brand long term. But that is how you get started.
So would you still, all these years later, start that way? And right now, would you still tell somebody, hey, Shopify is a great way because of all the things that you just mentioned, that you can really get started with minimal out-of-pocket cost. But then you did talk about how because they're doing everything, they also get the majority of the money. So if we should still start that way, and you said test the waters, test the proof of concept, so to speak, how long would you stay in that vein before you try to scale up or figure out how to fatten up profit margins and things of that nature?
Yeah, great question. The other great thing about Shopify is it has a lot of great native analytics, right? It'll show you your most viewed products, your most purchased products. Now, granted, especially if you're doing drop shipping, you might not be paying as close attention versus if you're just shipping it out yourself, then like every day I'm shipping out this particular item. But it has a lot of great analytics and I'm really big on data-driven decisions, right? So, funny story, I think it was about 2.5, 3 years ago, I had this great idea for a design, right? And I was like, Melanin Money, Barack, at the time, I want to say Barack had just got out of office or something. I was like, I'm going to create like $100 bill design, but with Barack on it, but I'm going to put the 44. I'm telling you, you couldn't tell me that like this wasn't going to crush it. It was the most intrinsic and detailed design I had ever come up with. I was like, with the 44 there, then Obama, and I'm going to change this to I was all in. Man, when I say nobody went for that shirt, my feelings was hurt a little bit. Like, Erykah Badu, I'm an artist and I'm sensitive about my stuff. You know what I'm saying? And so I just knew that was going to pop, right? But it didn't. So instead of me being ego driven and trying to force it to say, no, y'all just don't understand. And I'm going to keep trying to sell it. I stopped. And I could have left it in the store if I wanted to. It wasn't going to sell anyway. So just paying attention to the data, telling don't, it hurts your first time. Your first dud is going to hurt. You're like, man, I really thought that was going to pop. It's going to hurt a little bit. But at the end of the day, you got to just keep going, keep trying new designs. For every 3B, there's 4 duds. You know what I'm saying? Like, it is what it is. And so just knowing that that's par for the course. And when the data tells you got something, you got it. So you'll know because people will vote with their dollars. Right. And so to answer your question, when to scale is, I'd say if you get at least 100 people, right? 100 people to say, and they're not majority friends and family. If you get 100 people to say, I want that organically, right? Then I think you got something. And at that point, you can feel confident, at least doing small order inventories, selling out, small order inventories, selling out. And if it's still going well, then you can double down and even maybe get into paid advertising, which was a game changer for our brand as well. So hopefully that answers your question.
Yep, that was real good. Now, I want to dip back to something because you said a great resource to when you have these ideas in your brain that you need to bring to life. You said you went to Fiverr. It's a lot of people on Fiverr. It's a lot of people that say they good and can do X, Y, and Z. So talk about what your experience was. I mean, did you get it first time go? Like the first person you hollered at, like nailed it? Did you have to go through a couple of designers before you found the right one? Any advice you have around that?
Yeah. So I did my best to do some reasonable due diligence, right? Looked at how many reviews they had, looked at past designs, looked at, all that kind of stuff. And with my initial designs, believe it or not, I was able to get it right on the first try. Now, and to my defense, it's just words on a shirt. Now, if it would have been like more like the reason why I think the Barack thing didn't go is because it was more graphically inclined. I think, and to your point, the person I found to do it, I don't think they really brought it to life. And maybe that's just what I'm telling myself because I'm still a little salty it didn't sell. But if it's words on a shirt, and you find font. Here's the thing with Fiverr. With Fiverr, the reason why you're able to pay a little bit of money is because you need to be extremely clear with the deliverable. You want to front load as much context as possible. Whereas, like, if I hire a freelance designer, right, who I'm hiring them because they have an eye, and I feel like they're going to make it look better than I could even imagine. That's a different story. With Fiverr, it's very verbatim. It's very black and white. So to have success on Fiverr, you want to make sure that you've already probably preliminarily identified fonts that you like, right? Colorways and combinations that you like. Don't expect true creative direction. Expect execution on what you provide, right? If you can front load that and say, hey, here's the colors I'm looking for. Here's a similar fonts that I like. I think you'll have success. But if you just say, hey, this is design that I would really love to bring to life, and you're not far enough down the road with it, Fiverr might not be for you. You might want to spend a little bit of extra money on finding someone who can extract that from you, because I don't think you would have success on Fiverr.
Okay, cool. Now, when we set up this Shopify store, does Shopify also have products that you can put your graphic on? Or is there another company you have to connect to Shopify? Like, how does that work? I have my design. Now I'm trying to figure out, I know I want a shirt, but do I want a hat? Do I want a mug? Do I want, this, that, or the other?
Yeah, that's a great question. So that's the beautiful thing about the print on demand services. And there's 2 prominent ones. One is Printify and one is Printful. There's other ones. Those are the ones I just have an experience with. And what happens is once you get your design, you can integrate that app automatically natively to the store, and they have their own dashboard. And what'll happen is you'll log in and you'll say, to your point, I wonder what this would look like on a hat. I wonder what this would look like on a shirt. I wonder what this will look like on a mug. They'll have all of those items that you can sample. And what happens is you'll select it. And the way these apps work is Printify is a third-party platform for manufacturing companies, right? So it's important to notate that, because what happens is Printify is not responsible if, let's just say, one of the manufacturing companies has something that's out of stock, and Printify is not going to notify you that it's on your site. So what could happen, as a quick tangent, is you could have a mug, let's just say, on your website that you got by virtue of Printify, but that vendor is out of stock. Printify didn't notify you. Someone orders it. Printify's doing their job. Printify's job is to automate, right? But they're not communicating with the vendors if they discontinue that item. So now you got a disgruntled customer like, hey, it's been 2 weeks. I haven't gotten my mug, right? But you had no idea because you didn't realize that the vendor was out of stock. So I only said that to say it's important to understand that you still have to take on the responsibility of making sure that the vendors that you're leveraging are keeping these items in stock and there's no glitches there. But back to your point, you would select a vendor that has the colors that you're looking for, the items that you're looking for by virtue of Printify or Printful. And then once you select it, they'll have a certain amount of color options that you can choose from whatever item that you're searching. You have a very easy upload option from your computer. You can upload your logo. It's very easy to size it to see how big do you want to represent it. And by default, it's going to tell you to make sure the resolution is accurate, right? So it'll tell you like, hey, at this size, at this scale, the resolution is off. It's not as good. So you want to bring it down a little bit. You just, shrink it, play around with it. And within a few minutes, you'll have it. You can see a preview of exactly how it will look. And then from there, you hit, but you can do two things. At that point, you can just save the image. Let's say you're like, I do want to order a small inventory, right? Or I just want to do a pre-order and I don't want to use Printify, but I want to do a pre-order to see if people like the shirt, but I need something to show them. Then you could just save that image, put that image in your store as if it was inventory, mark it as pre-order. And then that way you can start taking orders and then use the pre-order money to go ahead and buy the inventory and save money on profit margins. That's legit. That's one thing I would have did differently, to answer your question earlier. So.
Yeah, that's good stuff. Good stuff. Now, this is kind of reminding me of like a 401k, because some people hear 401k and they think the 401k is the investment, where the 401k is just the vehicle. Because then after you open the 401k, you have to select the investment that you want inside the 401k. And so with this, Shopify is the store, but then you have to connect with either, you say, Printify or Printful to put the items inside the Shopify store. Legal & General America is the leader in low-cost term life insurance.
For nearly 70 years, Legal & General America has been providing financial protection to over 1.3 million families and businesses.
LGA makes understanding and applying for life insurance easy.
You can get a free quote by simply going to hisandhermoney.com/LGA.
So some people, I know for sure, anytime you're dealing with creatives are full of ideas. So say I got like 5 concepts in my head. Would your advice be to come out the gate with 5, 1, 3, to get things started?
I would narrow it down to 2. And the reason why I would narrow it down to 2, because I did the former, right? It's like, especially when you can leverage Printify. It's one thing when you're spending your own money on inventory, like, well, I gotta narrow it down. But with these apps like Printify, it's like, well, shoot, let me get the mugs, the hats, the shirts, the notebooks, the pens. I want it all, right? But the caveat to that is now you're kind of like spreading yourself too thin in the sense of being able to get real meaningful analytics of what people are actually gravitating towards, right? So my advice is to narrow it down to 2 and then only have maybe 2 to 3 SKUs per design, right? So maybe a hoodie, a t-shirt, and a hat. Excuse me. So that way it's easier for you to get a real pulse on what people want. Because here's the problem when you go big with all the different SKUs. Let's say people buy a little of everything, right? Then how do you know what makes sense to actually buy from an inventory perspective if you just put everything in the store? And on top of that, when people have too many options, they often they don't choose any. It's like, oh man, it's too much going on here. Like, let me get out of here, right? Now, it's one thing if you have an existing established brand and you're consistently and incrementally adding to your inventory. That's different. When you come out the gate and saying, hey, I got 50 SKUs, it's too much. Too much.
Good advice. So when did you make the decision? Well, let me ask, let me not assume. Are you still dealing with the print on demand services, or now have you gotten to a place to where you got inventory and people on your team mailing orders out?
Yeah, great question. And let me give you kind of the evolution of that. So first, to your point, first thing I started with was print on demand. Then I made the evolution to, which is one thing I wouldn't recommend. Well, I think it's always good to be a little bit hands-on. I bought this little print machine off Amazon. I was like, we're going to do it in-house. We're going to be vertically integrated. You know what I'm saying? I brought it in-house and had a buddy of mine, and we were in the garage and we were trying to press shirts, and it was a fun experience. It was fun to say. I'm glad I got the footage, but I would never do it again, right? So we did that because we want to increase profit margins as much as we could possibly increase them. But then I created a cage for myself with trying to like be Mr. Print on demand. I mean, do the printing ourselves. So I did that. Then what I did was I found a local vendor who could do all the printing for us. and I had someone else who helped with assist with the shipping of the items, right? Then we grew some more, and I was like, okay, well, what's next? Well, not only at this point, it became less about just the growth and more about like how do we offer a higher quality of garment, right? So like if you look at what I have on right now, like I had this, embroidered, alternate collar, all sorts of stuff happening, right? I didn't start there. I just t-shirts, next level, Bella canvas, and they were really good. They were decent. I would still sell those to this day, right? But at some point, if you're trying to elevate beyond merchandise and you want to like venture into fashion, and I'll explain the difference, you're probably going to have to find alternative vendors who can custom manufacture your stuff, because with Printify or Printful, it's all going to be very standard, right? Standard t-shirts, standard hoodies, mugs, just things that you can get anywhere, because that's how they can scale it, right? So I eventually had to venture out into finding a custom designer, and I have people like in Pakistan that make stuff, and I have a full fulfillment center in Los Angeles now. And our stuff at this point, like, because for me, customer service is big, and I don't know how much time we have, so I won't go into like super details on that, but I had to go through some learning curves of like customer service just to know how to deliver on our promise more effectively. And so with that, I wanted to make sure not only are we increasing the quality of our design, but we also have a system and a machine that can allow us to get stuff out in like 2 days, right? Because now the unfortunate part about it is people don't give you a lot of great, because of Amazon, thanks, Jeff, like people expect their stuff yesterday, right? Where's the drone? Why is it not on my front porch, right? And so, just trying to, I can't compete with Amazon, but do our best to deliver on a promise of getting you an item in a relatively quick turnaround time, because that matters too. At some point, it's not just about the quality of the garment, it's about the experience, about the customer experience. And that's what's going to make people come back to your brand. Have you started to intertwine things that make people feel good about when they shop with you? Right. So I know that's kind of a roundabout way to answer the question, but basically now we have a fulfillment center in Los Angeles. And we have vendors in Pakistan who make our custom stuff, and then vendors stateside who make our stuff that, we're just really confident in is our tried and true, that we know we want to get turned around pretty quickly.
Man, super dope, super dope. Now, you just brought up a good point when you talked about, competing with Amazon. So if you rewind back to, because most people listening and watching are getting ready to start. And so they'll probably follow your advice, set up Shopify, Printful, Printify. What were the delivery times like back then with those types of companies?
Yeah, so with Printify, man, sometimes it's so unpredictable, because here's the thing. Like I said, the Printify is another third party, right? And so it depends upon the vendor, but I would say anywhere from 3 to 10 days was a delivery time, right? On average, right? Sometimes a little quicker, sometimes a little longer, but anywhere between 3 to 10 days, depending upon the item and the third party vendor that you used. Oh, one thing that I want to say before I forget that's really, really important, because especially if you're starting a merch brand, and when we say merch brand, we mean you already have an existing business, an existing brand, and your thought process is, well, I got 100,000 followers on YouTube. People love us. So if I put the name of my brand on a shirt, sure, everybody will buy it. Not so fast, right? What I learned about building merchandise around an idea, around a theme, around a mission, is that people want to wear things that they can identify with, right? So when they see it, it's like, oh, that resonates with me. Here's an analogy to make you think about it. I'm not the biggest concert person. My wife is. She loves concerts. But every artist always has merchandise, most likely when they go on tour, right? Why does that merchandise sell so well? Is it because the artist is so big? Is it because there's so many people there? Maybe those are factors. But the reason why I believe it sells so well is because it's a productization of the intangible feeling that they get from the music, right? So if a person is aspiring to be a melanin millionaire, they're aspiring to be Black brilliant billionaire, and it's a feeling, right? My merchandise becomes the productized version of that mission, of that movement, right? Because believe it or not, when I put Melanin Money, which is the brand name, right? People love that as the brand. When I put that on the shirt, it didn't sell nearly as well as this or Melanin Millionaire. Subtle difference. Melanin Money, Melanin Millionaire, right? Melanin Millionaire is like, oh, that's me. I want that. So when you're thinking about what you're putting on your merchandise, are you putting things that people can identify themselves with as a part of wearing whatever it is you're selling? That was a huge understanding that I learned from just the data. I'm like, why is that? Why people tell me they love Melanin Money as a brand so much? When I put it on a shirt by itself, it doesn't sell. Now, long term, as your brand continues to grow exponentially, just like Nike, right? Nike started out just putting a little swoosh on their shirt, when they first started. Who's buying that, right? But just do it. Totally different story. So you just got to think about things like that and kind of get out of your own way of thinking like just because your brand is strong, that people are going to buy that on merchandise.
When you are detailing your evolution, let's go under the hood a little bit. How did you know it was time to evolve? Because you started with the shop. You told us to do a test run where if we see like 100 people organically gravitating toward a design, we can, do small runs and things like that. So from a number standpoint, what are we looking for profit wise? How do we know when to continue to, because at first you're going to want to, make a push out of your pocket towards it to push something forward. How do you know, okay, you know what? Yeah, man, it's time to scale up. I'm seeing this type of return on my investment. Is it a amount of merch? Is it a profit margin? Like, because you're a finance guy, what were you analyzing? Say, you know what, guys, it's time to scale up.
Yeah. So to your point, for me, at first it was like validating the idea to know if I would even feel confident enough spending my own money because I feel like I would get it back. So it was like us getting that 100 to 200 like mark. I was like, okay, people like this. So I'm willing to, buy small inventory orders to see if this works. And the reason why I was willing to buy it is because the data told me that if Printify is taking 40% of this and we're consistently selling, hundreds of shirts, if I take the front end risk of buying the inventory and my profit margins are going to be more like, 55 to 60, 70%, depending upon what I'm selling. Because at this time I wasn't selling like sweatshirts or anything like that. It was all t-shirts for the most part. Then for me, that was a clear indicator that based upon trends, if I'm willing to take this front end risk of buying the inventory, then I'm going to make more on the back end to justify it. Right. So I was seeing profit margins around that time, around 55 to 70%, depending upon the item. Right. So that was my indication there. Then once that got validated again, right, and I added additional designs, I actually took some designs away that weren't doing as well. Then from there, it's like, okay, well, now it's about traffic, right? Now it's about getting more eyeballs on my brand. There's a multitude of ways you can do that. You can do it through paid media, which is relatively predictable, and you can have a lot of great analytics. You can partner with ambassadors. And ambassadors are people who are willing to, shout about your brand or rep your brand because they have an audience. You say ambassadors / influencers. There's a lot of things you can do to like improve your reach, right? For me, from a predictability standpoint, because I'm a numbers guy, I got to a point where I was like, if I'm consistently selling through the orders that I'm paying for, now I want to do paid media. But paid media is a lot more tricky because there's a lot more variables, right? Number one, you have to determine what you're willing to spend to acquire a customer. But that needs to be based on what the data is telling you the lifetime value of that customer. Because here's where people go wrong with paid advertising. Because if let's say it costs you $30 to acquire a customer for your merch brand, and let's say you buy your t-shirts cost you 25, let's say you sell them for $25. Number one, first you got to understand, because it's a physical product, you're not profiting all of that money first and foremost, right? So not only are you losing money on the acquisition, right? If the data isn't telling you that they're going to come back and spend a total of, let's say $180, then you could be selling a lot in loot and burning capital and not even realize it until it's too late, right? So you have to make very specific data-driven decisions that says, okay, my data, I didn't do paid ads. Like I started mailing in money in 2018. I didn't start doing paid ads consistently until almost 2 years later. Now, I'm not saying you have to take that long. I just didn't know much about paid media at the time, right? So I did a typical bootstrap, pop-up shops, that kind of thing, right? But I'm glad that I did because it gave me enough data to be able to see, okay, my average customer spends X. So I can afford to spend this to acquire them. My average customer lifetime value is this. So even if I'm spending a little bit more to acquire them than their initial purchase, the data is telling me that on average, I'm still going to make X from them, which makes me profitable in the long run, right? But then at the same token, even if it's going to make you profitable in the long run, you have to make sure you have the capital reserves because that lifetime value could be over 24 months. And that might sound good on paper, but you might not literally be able to afford to lose money, even though the data is telling you that if you have the economic stamina, it will make sense. So you can't just think that it's all about just starting a t-shirt brand. People want it, they're buying it. Let me add fuel to the fire and get everybody to my store, because you could break your business, right, really quickly if you don't know what you're doing.
Whew, so many different ways I want to go now, because I'm like, man, it's more than a notion to create a successful merchandise brand for your existing company, or for, if that's the company in and of itself. I'm curious about some back office stuff. Did you establish this as its own LLC or entity from the beginning, or at a certain point later? And then another common question that I see is from a protection standpoint. Like, are you trademarking designs from the beginning or protecting them later on? Like, what's your advice there?
Great question, right? So to the legal question, part of the question, I had kind of I guess you could say a parent company set up initially. I didn't know how this was going to do. I was like, let me get started. And again, my legal friends and my personal attorney is probably cringing right now, but I was just like, let's just see what's going to happen. Let's not create problems before, there are problems. Right. So I was like, let's just get this thing going. You know what I mean? So I didn't initially start with its own separate thing. As a matter of fact, funny story with Shopify, so I had an older brand that was kind of like my financial education brand when I first got started in the industry. And it was Make Sense to Me. It was my education brand. And so because I didn't yet have the Melanin Money brand all figured out, when I started my trial with Shopify, the Shopify extension was my shopify.makesenseapparel.com, and you can't change that. So to this day, granted, the public can't see it, but to this day, that is the Shopify URL, right? So to your point, just started the website, didn't have an additional LLC. I had another company that when I was doing my, speaking engagements and things like that, that's where my money came. I just kind of rolled it up to that, fully transparent. Then about a year into it, when I saw that things were trending, I was like, this could be something. Still didn't quite know for sure. I was like, this feels like it could be something. That's when I set up my LLC separately for this business. And then about another year later is when I did the trademark, right? Now, what I will say is I understand the value of protecting yourself early. And I do think there's value in doing that, because, what you would hate to do is sell all this stuff and someone else randomly, does have your thing trademarked, and that could be a whole nightmare. So I understand the value of that. I'm just speaking from personal experience. Trademarks aren't cheap. And for me, I wanted to validate what I was doing. That was a risk I was willing to take. And again, my attorney friends are probably cringing right now, but that was a risk I was willing to take. I'm like, set up the LLC, get the trademark for every design. And imagine if I got the trademark for the Barack design. That would have been $2,500 down the drain. You know what I mean? So just don't create problems before they're problems. Now, do understand there is a far off chance that someone could have potentially, right, prematurely had your trademark. It's possible. I'm not going to deny that. But me personally, telling my experience, when I think about cost allocation and what it takes to build something from scratch and being scrappy about it, that is not where I wanted to allocate my capital at the time, was being fancy, right? Now, if you are at a place where you can afford to start things out the right way, you're just so confident, maybe you've done surveys or whatever, you maybe even show people the design, or maybe you did I don't know. And you feel uber confident in what you're building from the get-go, and you have those resources, by all means, I'm definitely wouldn't advocate against going ahead and setting up things the right way. I just didn't start out that way because I wanted to see if this thing was going to be a thing before I went crazy with it.
Good advice. Sound advice, because trademarks ain't cheap at all. So we've taken your advice, and now we've got the things. We got the hats or the mugs or the shirts, and you kind of touched briefly. You said, this is what I would have done differently, and that was a pre-sale. What does that look like? Now we got our stuff. We called our cousins. We pulled out our iPhones with the 4K cameras, and we took some shots, and we want to put them on. What are you advising us to do for a pre-sale? 7 days out, a month out, and what are we saying to people? Hey, guess what?
Yeah, I'm gonna give y'all the full sauce, on what I would have did completely differently had I known, right? which is going to involve the pre-sale context, right? So the first and foremost is the number one best thing to do before you sell anything is to try to build an audience, right? Now, if this is truly an ancillary business and it's not like, man, I got to sell these shirts today because I'm trying to, keep the lights on. This is something you're trying to build for the long haul alongside of something else. And maybe it might become the main thing eventually. My advice is make sure that you have an audience, right? So I would focus on whatever your existing business is. If it's the same audience, or if you don't have an existing business that is going to be that demographic, build the audience first. So think about who is the person that would buy my merchandise. That's not my mom or my cousin, right? Who is the person that would actually buy it? And what resonates with them, and start to create awareness around that persona, right? Whether it's an Instagram page, whatever, like, or whether it's on your own page, right? That's the first thing I would do, is I would build anticipation. So let's say you're the brand, right? Because we live in an age where, like, people do better than brands, if you will. So let's say it's you, right? So what I would do is I would get, as I'm, speaking this message or building up this audience, this anticipation around the idea of what I'm going to sell, I would start getting samples printed. I wouldn't tell anybody I got a brand yet. I would start getting samples printed when I'm doing my content, when I'm doing my thing. Oh, yo, man, where'd you get that from? Just something I got made. I thought it was cool. You should sell those. Ding, ding, ding. Oh, okay, cool. They have no idea, right? That's your intention. But just wear it. You know what I'm saying? Start to build up the awareness and the platform around the idea of what the person would resonate who's buying your stuff. That's what I would do differently. Then that's going to validate some level of demand, right? And I'm not saying it's like foolproof, because, people will tell you all day long, man, you should sell that, I'll buy it. And then the site goes live and they're ghost, right? So I'm not saying it's foolproof, but what it does do is it does give you some awareness. So start taking those samples and you wear them, or you give them out to people who, like, again, are in front of the audience of people who are most likely going to resonate with the brand. Use that as initial data, and then you can hit the typical influencer line. Well, a lot of people have been asking me to finally release this. So, I wasn't going to do it, but I'm going to go ahead and drop this, right? So here's the thing. I want to make sure y'all really want it. So what I'm going to do, instead of just buying a bunch of shirts, bunch of hoodies, whatever you're going to sell, I'm going to do a pre-order, right? And be upfront, be transparent, because people don't read. We live in this Amazon era. So be upfront, be transparent, and say, hey, look, this is a pre-order. We will start fulfilling 2 weeks after the pre-order window. Be very specific. Give yourself grace. Don't overpromise. Don't and under deliver, right? And say, hey, so do it the pre-order that way. Build up that organic buzz, and then from there, if you do that successfully, you might not even have to leverage Printify, right? Because then at that point, you already have customers before you've bought anything. And if you go that route, the simplest thing to do is don't buy your own printer. It's find a local vendor you can find this very easily on Google, local apparel printers, right? Vet it out, do some price comparison, then do your research, your reviews, get them to do your first order. Go to a site called, a Sticker Mule. You can get your own custom mailers, or you can go to Amazon and just get like custom mailers, right? Or just regular generic mailers. And then for the first little pre-order, you ship it out. The reason why that's good, I don't recommend it long-term, but it's good because now, number one, you have an initial hands-on experience to know how you want your product to be sent out in the first place, so that when you do outsource it, you can delegate appropriately. You can't delegate something you can't articulate, right? People love to delegate, do this, and they can't tell you the first thing about it. They have no SOPs, no processes in place, right? So you do it once, right? Or twice, a couple times, because that way you know what you want it to look and feel like. Shopify is super intuitive. Person places their order. You get all the address information. You can print a label right from the store. It's super easy, right? And then you ship it out. That's how I would have done it differently. Profit margins would have been stronger, and I would have been able to build up some awareness and data the same way, without having to give up the money to Printify.
Good stuff, man. You giving out the game, man. This is my last question that I've been asked, and I don't have the answer to none of these questions. Why I'm asking George. If you are an existing entrepreneur, because you said one of the things that you would do up front would be to build an audience. So say you've done that. Are you creating a separate social media presence for this merchandise brand, or is it incorporated into the audience that I've already built with whatever I did to create that first initial my presence online?
Right. It depends on what you're selling, right? So if you're creating like like for example, his and her money, right? Like if y'all are creating catchphrases and slogans that resonate with your audience and things that you said on past podcasts or things that y'all are known for, integration. No need to create a separate Instagram, right? Because at the end of the day, you're building community, which is, again, I mentioned it loosely in the beginning, but like the easiest way to build a brand nowadays, in my opinion, is to build a brand ecosystem. Because to just put an arbitrary brand out there, no matter how fly your stuff is, it's like you're competing with God knows how many people. But if I intertwine valuable content, i.e., my music, right, my mixtape, right, and then I have this physical manifestation of this value that I've been providing you, that's a lot easier to sell, right? Versus like, man, I just hope people really like my stuff. And I say it all the time. Like, I don't think people are buying Black Brilliant Billionaire in the Making because they think it's going to feel like cashmere on their skin. They're buying it because the messaging resonates with them. And then now they're buying it because they're intertwined into this brand ecosystem. They listen to the podcast. They're in the Melanin Millionaires Club. And so our merchandise becomes the official uniform for Wealth Builders of Color, right? It's like, hey, right? So it's like, if it were me, that's what I would do. Now, if you're really trying to lean into fashion, you want like this standalone thing, and you're just leveraging your brand to drive traffic to that, then yeah, you'd want to have a separate brand, right? Because you don't want to sell, I'm trying to think something like a 3-piece suit, right? There's no alignment there, right? It's like people ask me all the time, because personally, I'll wear a suit here and I don't wear them nearly as much as I used to, but I'll wear a suit here and they'll be like, man, you wear suits, man, you kill suits. You ever gonna do suits for Melanin Money? No, doesn't make any sense. You know what I mean? Maybe it's something I can't see, but right now it doesn't make any sense, right? So there just has to be alignment. If there's alignment, go ahead and intertwine that as a part of your existing brand. If it starts to take on its own legs and you want to like have a place where people can go exclusively just to see it, that's great. But as a small business owner, that's just something else you got to manage, right? Versus being able to intertwine it as a part of your existing page, right? So it's similar to the advice on the LLC. If it becomes a thing, if it's like, yo, like if I'm being honest with myself, the data's telling me that above everything else I've done, people are flocking to the merch. Okay, cool. Maybe at that point, consider branching out and having its own page if you really feel like you need to. But beyond that, if you've already built a brand and there's alignment in the messaging of what you're selling, intertwine it in the same Instagram page.
Nice. So obviously you know what you're talking about. So tell everybody how to keep up with you, tell them about the show, your community, and all the stuff that you got going on, George.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, again, thank you so much for having me. I'm most active on Instagram. I'm still haven't quite figured out the whole TikTok thing yet. So y'all give me some grace there. But you can find me at George Achimpong Jr. on IG. I tweet a little bit. You can find me there as well. Other than that, our brand page, we do have a brand page at this point, but it is Melanin Money. So @_Melanin Money _. That's where you can find clips and highlights of our podcast. You can find a post or two about the merch, and just any value add and content centered around personal finance, wealth building, and entrepreneurship. And if you really want to hang out with us, you can come over to the Melanin Millionaires Club, where we have classes every single week highlighting those same topics: personal finance, entrepreneurship, wealth building. We have monthly challenges. We have a lot of fun stuff for those who are trying to take their finances to the next level. So those are, that's how you can tap in with me, and all that stuff can be found in the link in my bio on Instagram. If you want to tap in further, I'm not one of those guys who does not respond to DMs. So if I see it, I will respond. So give me grace on the timing, but I'm not bougie. I don't have the no DMs in my bio. So feel free to reach out. I would love to respond and answer your question again. If you're smart, you might be able to get some more free game out of me, because I love, as you can see, running my mouth about the things that I do. So.
Good stuff. We appreciate you stopping by and breaking it down for us. So for those who are on the fence and like, man, I've been sitting on this merchandise idea for a while. I just heard George lay it out, but I'm still like, man, can I do this? What would you say to them?
Start where you are. You do what you can, use what you have, right? I don't believe that God plants seeds in any of us if he won't provide us the tools we need to cultivate it. That's just what I believe, right? And so if you've had that idea, it means it's for you to bring to the world. And don't be discouraged. And remember, building a business is a stage play, right? At the end of the day, nobody knows how it's supposed to be but the people on stage. So, you might have this long, grand vision of, man, but I want to sell this and I want to have the special lining on my clothes and all that kind of stuff. That might be the long-term vision, right? But nobody knows that but you, right? So start exactly where you are, get into it. And then over time you can evolve, right? How many updates does Apple push out to your cell phone, every month, right? Do they say, well, man, did they say in 2009 that because it doesn't have all the features that the one now, did they say, well, we're not going to create it until we can create that version? No, you put something out and you iterate, you improve, you evolve, but you must get started, right? I live in Charlotte, North Carolina, and the airport has been under construction for the past 5 years and will probably be under construction for another 5 years, but it's still $1 billion enterprise. The neighborhood that I live in, right? They've been doing construction for the past couple of years. They didn't say, well, we can't accept any new, people moving into these houses until, we get this thing done. Nah, like here's what I'll say. Final quote. You can live in the house while it's being renovated. Remember that. You can live in the house while it's being renovated. So just remember that. Build as you go.
Using that in one of my sermons. I'm sorry.
Hey, you got it, brother. You got it.
That was a good one, man. You can live in the house while the house is still being renovated. Oh man, that's going to church with me. I can't say thank you enough, George, for coming by the His and Her Money Show and being so gracious with your time and your knowledge. I'm sure everybody listening is going to be in a much better place as a result. So thank you very much.
And thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it, man.
Well, there you have it, ladies and gentlemen, another action-packed episode. You got work to do. You've been thinking, you've been strategizing, and now it's time to execute. We bring you great guests just like George because we want you to win. We want you to take dominion. Remember, dominion isn't handed out. It has to be taken. So take dominion starting now. Remember, we got plenty of episodes just like this at our website, hisandhermoney.com. That's all we got for this time, guys. It's been great. Until next time, peace.